And we have the next amazing session on Mission Deadline Possible: Unmasking Project Management Secrets in Digital Marketing.
Hey.
Hi, Vicky. Oh my God, I'm so excited to see you after such a long time.
I
And
know, it's been a while. Good to see you. Thank you for inviting me, guys.
yes, absolutely. And let me introduce you to these amazing people that, I'm so excited to announce our awesome blossom speaker, which is Vicky Simmance, who is going to rock the stage again on Friday, I guess. SE on the beach, right?
Would have
Awesome.
been
So,
amazing.
ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Vicky.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thanks so much for that great introduction, Himani. Okay, hi everyone. Lovely to see you. So my talk is called Mission Deadline Possible: Unmasking Project Management Secrets in Digital Marketing. So basically what I'm going to talk about today is why project management processes are so important, and some examples of processes you can implement for yourself or your team to help ensure work is delivered efficiently and on time. Okay, so why have I chosen to talk about project management processes, and why am I qualified to talk about them? So I've been working as an operations director in digital marketing since 2017. The core accountability of my role during that time has always been to make sure teams deliver work on time, to spec, and to a high quality. So implementing project management processes has been a key part of that the whole time. I'm also Prince 2 and Prince 2 Agile Qualified Practitioner, which are project management qualifications, and help to further demonstrate my knowledge and passion in this area. Okay, so to begin with, why are project management processes important? Why should we all have them, regardless of if we work on our own or as part of a team? So to understand this, we first need to look at the risks involved if we don't have project management processes in place. So I've worked with a range of super smart and highly skilled digital marketing teams, but they hadn't always had the resources available to implement and maintain proper project management processes. So what this meant is that they struggled to deliver work on time to spec, which led to clients being unhappy. They weren't able to manage their time efficiently, which impacted profitability, and there were issues with accountability across the team. So project management processes help avoid these issues, and they help you to maintain traction so that work's delivered on time to spec. They help ensure work is delivered profitably and efficiently, and they also hold individuals accountable for delivery across the team. And a key point to note as we move through is that these processes work best when used together rather than in isolation. So I'll explain how they support each other as we move through. Okay, so the first thing I'd say when it comes to key project management processes is make sure you use a project management tool to easily and efficiently manage your team workflows. So we all know there's just normally so many different moving parts involved in the successful delivery of a client, project, or retainer, which is why it's a simple to-do list just isn't enough. So having all tasks stored in one place centrally and having them assigned, scheduled, and monitored, it means we can plan ahead. So we can make sure the right people are working on the right tasks, and they have the time scheduled to work on them. It's easier for us to monitor progress, so we can see ahead of time if a task is likely to be off track, so then we can take the opportunity to address any issues and bring it back on track. And then also team members have visibility into what they're expected to deliver and by when, which provides a sense of ownership and accountability. So when it comes to what project management tools to use, there's just so many available out there. It's quite interesting when you speak to people about their preference, they get quite passionate about it. So what I'm not going to do here is go through the pros and cons of each tool, because that would be a whole talk in itself. But if you are looking for a starting point, these are examples of a few tools that I've used in the past, which I can recommend based on my experience. So first of all, you've got ClickUp. So ClickUp is probably one of my personal favourites. due to the fact it's easy to create workflows using tasks and subtasks, and then manage these using automations. You've then got Monday.com, which I found personally really good when I was working with a lot of people outside of my organisation due to the different access and communication features. And then you've got Asana, which has got an interface that's nice and simple to use, and it benefits from a wide range of integrations. So as I said, lots of project management tools to choose from, and different teams are going to have different preferences depending on their size, their area of expertise, and other needs. Okay, so top tips to get the most out of your project management tool. So the first thing I'd say is make sure you segment your task lists. So in terms of digital marketing teams, the most popular way you're going to want to segment your task lists are firstly by clients, so you can make sure you're delivering what's agreed in the contract, by team members, so everyone's got clear visibility of what they're expected to deliver and by when, and then also internal processes as well. And the reason I flag this is, so when I say internal processes, so it's things like sales, marketing, training, etc. And the reason I've mentioned to include this is that often when I've worked with teams, they haven't always included these due to the primary focus on client delivery. So we want to make sure that these internal processes are scheduled as well, so we've got time to deliver them. The other thing that I found when I've worked with digital marketing teams is that sometimes they haven't included their internal processes within their project management tool because they've actually got these stored elsewhere. So, for example, they might use HubSpot as a CRM. And if that's the case, then that's actually not an issue because nowadays there's normally integrations where you can actually align tasks between two tools. So have them across both, make sure they're aligned, and I'll talk more about that shortly. So next thing I'd say when it comes to project management tools is make sure you break your bigger tasks down into subtasks. So when it comes to bigger tasks, for example, those expected to take at least more than a day or have multiple people involved, breaking it down by subtasks means it's easy for us to keep track in terms of precisely the stage the task is at. It means we can assign different people to different tasks. And it also means we can provide a written brief for each subtask, which helps team members to stay on track. And on that note, we also need to make sure we're including all relevant information in the task. So as I said earlier, just having a simple to-do list just isn't enough. If we want to maintain traction and accountability, we need to make sure all tasks have firstly a written brief to avoid ambiguity, unless it really is a super simple task. We need an assignee, so we know who's accountable for delivery. And then we also need a start date and a due date. And this is quite an important point because often when I've worked with teams, they've just had a due date for tasks, which isn't really enough as it doesn't really take into account any other tasks a person needs to complete before that. So it's important to have both a start date and a due date. It's also useful to have a time estimate, so you know how much time to schedule in from a planning perspective. And then also time tracking is really important as well. So in my experience, this isn't always everyone's favourite thing to do, but actually it's really important in terms of measuring our profitability, and I'll talk more about this shortly. And then finally, it's also useful to have a status column so you can precisely see what status each stage is at. So some examples of useful statuses to include, you've got not started, starting today, which is useful when it comes to daily stand-ups, which we'll talk about shortly. And then you've got in progress, blocked, in review, and complete. Okay, so next thing I'd say when it comes to project management tools is make sure you automate as much as possible. So probably one of the most useful features of them is the ability to easily automate routine tasks. So rather than you having to go into the tool and manually make changes once something's been completed, you can instead focus on more interesting stuff and avoid delays. So in terms of examples of automations in common digital marketing workflows, good example is content production. So if you are a business where you're including content, and as that content moves through different stages, so for example, write brief, write the content, upload it to the website, You can make it in your project management tool so that as the piece of content moves through the workflow, your assignee is automatically updated, your start date, your due date, your time estimate, etc. So all of that's done automatically for you. It can also be great from a new business perspective. So for example, if you've got your sales pipeline within your project management tool, when the status of that prospect changes to 1, then you can make it so that a list of onboarding tasks for that new client is automatically created. So again, saving you a lot of time. And then just a final example of how I've found automation is really useful in project management tools is for following up. So for example, if we're waiting for information or feedback from a client, you can make it so you automatically send yourself an email to follow up once the status has been awaiting information for 1 week, for example. So it's really good at giving you those automated reminders. In addition to that, the ability to integrate project management tools with other software is also another fantastic feature, as having everything aligned removes the need to update multiple tools. So it means we're reducing the chance of manual error and we're boosting productivity. So some examples of popular integrations with project management tools you can see here. So first of all, you've got Google Calendar. So this is really good because it means that anything that you've got scheduled in your project management tool automatically gets pulled through to your Google Calendar, and then changes in one get reflected in the other. So that's super useful. And then if you use Harvest as a time tracking tool, for example, you can make it so that the 2 systems stay aligned so that any changes in one get reflected in the other. And similar also with HubSpot. So if you use that as a CRM, you can align the 2 systems so that any task status that change in your project management software or in HubSpot stay aligned. So that's really helpful. And then the final thing I'd say when it comes to project management tools, and you've probably heard this phrase in every presentation today, you probably still will. Is watch out for AI. So AI is becoming increasingly popular in project management tools, like it is everywhere else. We're already seeing some great developments in it, so it'll be good to keep an eye on that and see how it evolves. So for example, with ClickUp, they released AI last month, and with that you can give it some relatively simple instructions and it produces some detailed project plans in seconds. It's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves, and that's going to be super useful to the project management process. Okay, so second point when it comes to key project management processes is make sure you schedule regular team communications to maintain traction and accountability. So having all your tasks detailed, assigned and scheduled in one place is definitely core to best practice project management, but it's only if it's supported by regular structured communications that we can really maintain traction and accountability. So what I'll do now is talk through some examples of best practice comms you can use with your team to help ensure they stay aligned and on track. Okay, so first of all, we've got daily stand-ups, sometimes called daily scrums or daily huddles. And these are probably one of the most effective and popular processes for helping teams to stay aligned and on track. So they're called daily stand-ups to reflect the fact they should be very short meetings, as traditionally these meetings would be done standing up face-to-face. So whilst nowadays doing your daily stand-ups actually standing up is optional, what should remain consistent is that they're scheduled at the same time at the beginning of each workday. They last no longer than 15 minutes, and they also involve less than 10 people. So this means if you've got a team of 10 people or more, you want to split it down into multiple daily stand-ups to reflect your team structure. So for example, you might have a stand-up for the SEO team and then another one for the PPC team. Another thing that should remain consistent about daily stand-ups is their structure. So team members might take it in turns to lead the daily stand-ups or rotate the order they go in. But what should remain consistent are the 3 key points that they talk through during the daily stand-up. So first of all, team members should list what they've completed since the previous daily stand-up. Then they should list what they're planning to work on that day, along with what's actually going to be completed that day. And then thirdly, they should raise any questions in relation to the tasks or any barriers to completion. And on this last point, if those barriers or questions can't be easily addressed within the daily stand-up, they should be discussed by the appropriate people after the meeting, so we can then ensure the daily stand-up is kept short. Okay, so if you don't already do daily stand-ups with your team, I'd encourage you to start them as soon as possible. They're really good for helping teams to stay aligned and on track. They encourage accountability, and they're also actually a great way of staying connected with your team, particularly if you're a remote team. Okay. So another touch point that within digital marketing teams that complements the daily stand-up are end-of-week updates. So I've actually found these particularly helpful when working with 4-day workweek agencies, just because the time between the last daily stand-up of the week and the first is obviously longer. So it's been particularly important in these instances to make sure tasks are or aren't on track to be completed. So in terms of guidelines for effective end-of-week updates, the first thing I'd say is what I found in practice works well is actually asking team members to share an update in a shared messaging channel. The reason being, this removes the need for another meeting, but it still gives everyone visibility on progress, which is really important. So your end-of-week update should be scheduled for mid-afternoon on the last working day of the week, as at this point, your team members are going to have a good idea of what is or isn't on track to be completed on time. And then in terms of the structure of the end-of-week updates, team members should detail the tasks they're planning to work on today, the tasks that they said they'd be working on during the daily stand-up, and then put the status next to each task. So for example, completed, in progress, on track to be completed on time, in progress, not on track to be completed on time. And then for those tasks that aren't on track to be completed on time, team members need to give a clear reason as to why, so they can discuss and agree next steps with their manager. Okay. And then finally, we've got task briefing and check-in meetings. So in terms of your daily stand-up and your end-of-week updates, so these are great for ensuring the whole team stays aligned and on track. But if you've got more complex deliverables or maybe a bigger deliverable that a team member hasn't worked on before, this is where it can be useful to have a separate set of meetings so that you can focus in on that in more detail. So the key point to note here, which I've put at the bottom of the screen, is you need to make sure these meetings are scheduled in advance, as that then makes sure you've got time to make any changes required between the meetings, and you're still not going to you're going to make sure you hit the final deadline. So first of all, we've got briefing meeting. So having a verbal briefing meeting in addition to a written brief is really helpful for team members, as it gives them an opportunity to discuss the tasks, and it means the person who's delivering the task has an opportunity to ask questions. The person who's delivering it can make sure they've understood the brief. And we then got check-in meeting or meetings, and this is a vital step that sometimes gets overlooked. So if you've got a task that's going to last for any duration, it's important to agree a point at which you're going to check in with each other on progress. So for example, that might be once the person delivering the task has completed a certain amount, or it might be after a certain amount of time has elapsed. Either way, it's just good to make sure that partway through you're checking in on progress, so you can make sure it's on track, or if it isn't on track, which could be the case, you've still got time to bring it back on track. And then finally, you've got your internal review meeting. And the main point to note here is that this should be scheduled at least a day before the final deadline, just to make sure you've got time to make any tweaks if needed. Okay. And then the final key point I'd say when it comes to project management processes is, and this is vital, make sure you know your numbers. So we need to be measuring client and team utilization to maximize profitability. So the processes I've outlined so far are great for helping to ensure work is delivered efficiently. But it's also really important that we make sure the work, we measure how profitable the work we're delivering actually is, so that we can then review and make changes over time as needed. Okay, so first of all, how do we calculate profitability? So typically we want to calculate profitability in two ways. So first of all, we've got gross profit, which is the amount of money made once any direct costs have been deducted, where direct costs would include people's salaries or any other direct costs incurred to deliver a service. So for example, if you're working on an SEO retainer and as part of that you use external copywriting services, that would be a direct cost. You've then got net profit. So net profit is the amount of money made once any direct costs have been deducted, as well as any operating expenses, sometimes called OPEX, which you can see here. So where operating expenses are any costs incurred to run a business that you wouldn't directly attributed to a service. So good examples of that are costs for IT, marketing, training, team benefits, etc. So we want to make sure we're calculating profitability in both of these ways, as we need to understand how profitable the business is in terms of the services it delivers, which is gross profit, and then how profitable it is based on once we factor in any other costs to run the business, which is net profit. And then very roughly speaking, as I do say very roughly because what good looks like will vary between agencies, but typically we want to be aiming for around 50% gross profit and 20% net profit. Okay, so what is client utilization and why is it important to measure to optimize profitability? So client utilization is the amount of time and amount of hours we spend on a client as a proportion of their budgeted hours, which you can see here. So in terms of how we calculate budgeted hours for a client per month, typically what a digital marketing team will do is take the revenue that client brings in per month, minus any direct costs outside of salaries. So again, if you're using external copywriting services, and then divide that revenue by an hourly rate. So this hourly rate will typically be calculated by finance, because they'll be able to consider, how much in terms of what people's salaries are, how much it costs in terms to run the business day to day, and then also in terms of the net profit we're looking to achieve. So generally, we want to aim for around 90 to 110% client utilization. Or to put it another way, we want to be delivering minus 10% or plus 10% of the budgeted hours. And the reason being is that if we're performing within these parameters, then we're more likely to be profitable. So this is why time tracking is such an important part of the project management process. Again, not everyone's favorite thing, but this is why it is so important to explain to teams, why it's important we do the time tracking, because it's only if we do that we really know how profitable we are. It then follows on from this that if we're measuring client utilization, we can identify which clients we're over or under delivering on, so we can then adjust our resources accordingly. And it also enables us to identify opportunities for increasing spend. So, for example, if a client genuinely does require more time than what's currently budgeted for. Okay, and then finally, how do we measure team utilization, and why is it important to measure to optimize profitability? So, team utilization is the number of billable hours an individual team member works, or the amount of time spent on client work as a proportion of their overall working hours. So the key point to note here is that team utilization, ideal utilization rates are going to vary depending on a person's role. So for example, for an SEO executive, we'd expect them to spend most of their time working on client work, whereas for a director, we'd probably expect them to split their time more evenly between client work and non-billable work. And when I say non-billable work, I mean things such as internal projects, management, training, etc. Hence, in terms of like ballpark utilization rates, we'd probably look at around 85% for an executive, 75% for a manager, and 50% for a director. So again, it's super important that we measure team utilization, because we know that if we're performing broadly within these parameters, we're more likely to be profitable. Following on from this as well, in turn, if we're measuring team utilization, it's easier for us to make sure that the right people are working on the right tasks. So then we're boosting productivity and profitability. And then also it actually helps us to spot ahead of time if we're likely to exceed the optimal utilization rates. So for example, if you know your team is getting near capacity, you've got more clients coming on, we can then plan ahead to make sure we're recruiting, we're bringing in resource, and to minimize team stress, which is really important. Okay, so now I've talked through why project management processes are important and some examples of processes you can implement for yourself, your team. Hopefully everyone's learned something today that they can take away in action. So to summarise the key points, project management processes help support traction, accountability and profitability. Make sure you use a project management tool to easily and efficiently manage your team workflows. Regular team comms are really important to maintain traction accountability. And finally, make sure you know your numbers. So measure client and team utilization to maximise profitability. Okay, so yes, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
OMG, 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 Vicky, that was amazing. I mean, I was like, what all notes I should make and what all notes I should miss out. I mean, like, I was like just making screenshots and making notes. And I mean, like, the calculations were beyond brilliant. I just love that.
Okay. Yeah, it's always it's interesting because it's these sort of things that you think, oh, everyone knows this. They're running an agency. Everyone knows how to do this, right? But I think this is why I've really enjoyed my role actually, because when I've been to work with different agencies, so it's been slightly different teams, different challenges, different areas of expertise. But yeah, it's always interesting to see actually it is getting those there might be basics, but they're not always basics. It's just getting those things implemented and maintained because it's not actually that easy when you've got, you've got a team of people and you've got a business to run.
Absolutely. It's a huge pain. I'm sure a lot of people over here would agree to that. So, yeah, awesome. So I'll take a couple of questions. All right. Okay. So one question is, okay, so how do you deal with uncertainty and risk in digital marketing projects?
Oh, good question. So I think this is around from obviously from a project management process point of view. I think a lot of it is down to, and this is part of it actually, making sure things are detailed and agreed up front. Make sure we're speaking to the client, we're understanding what their needs are, what their expectations are. And to be honest, a lot of this is going to be done up front. The other thing I would say as well is that over time needs do change. So I think this is the key thing where we're constantly, from a project management perspective, it is managing, what we're delivering against what's been agreed, but then we need to have some flexibility in there to work with the clients and meet their needs. So I would say this is where it does come to making sure we've got things recorded and detailed, and having regular comms with the client as well and working with them on that.
Oh, awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so I'll take another question from Anne. With regard to drawing conclusions, how do you learn and improve from your project experiences?
Oh, that's a really good question. Thank you, Anne. Honestly, it really is. This is the other thing as well. So with project management, the other thing I'd say is not one size fits all. So I've gone through some best practices today. And I think I sort of highlighted that when I was talking about what tool to use. And also different teams do work differently. So I think from my point of view is I'll go in with what I know is best practice, but equally I can't go in and do that straight away. I have to get to know the team, their processes, the people. So it's a very, and the other thing that you'll know, Himani, you can't just introduce something straight away. There's a lot of change management involved. So that's a key part of the process as well. So yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout way of answering the question. But I think it really is, you do need to go in, you need to listen to the team, understand how they work, what are they working on? Because actually, the other thing is I've worked on clients that do website builds. I've worked on, with agencies that do SEO, PPC. social, and they are very different. So you need to be going in. The first point is going and understand what they do, how they work, and then from there thinking about, okay, based on this is how you work, this is the process that's going to work best. So there will be like some general, like things like daily stand-ups. They're generally quite good for maintaining traction, but you are going to have to work with the team and work out what's going to be best for them.
Absolutely. And that's how it is. You learn it while you test it, and what works for you and what doesn't.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And as I say, I've not had one client where they use the same tool or the same processes, and we've done stuff and it's worked for one and not the other. So, yeah.
So true. So true. Awesome. Great then, Vicky. It was really wonderful having you over here. We have learned a ton of, amazing things, and do give our regards to Chris.
Oh, I will. Don't worry. I will. He says hello as well. He's at a conference at the moment.
Oh, yes, yes. Give my hi to him as well.
I will. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Okay. Awesome. Great then. Thank you so much.